14,000 staff across 4 campuses, so primarily in Victoria. We've recently announced a campus in India, so doing a bit of expansion outside of Victoria as well, which is going to be interesting from a security standpoint. About 14,000 managed workstations, 3,000 plus servers that we manage within the data center in the university, about 400 staff in IT and 16 staff in cyber. So just to give you a bit of perspective on the size of the organization as well. So jumping straight into it, I was trying to contemplate where do I actually start about the incident. Everyone talks about all the breaches that have happened across, and I thought I'll just get a list as well. So this is a list of all noteworthy breaches, all the breaches that have been reported in Australia since the start of the year, and I was like, this is way too long to be real. And from the time I started making these slides, I've started adding to it. There's one from yesterday which I didn't get a chance to add to yet, but you can see this has become a lot common than we want it to be. So Deakin, funny enough, made it to the list last year. So where did it all start? It started on a lovely Sunday night, which generally how it is. I got an email from a colleague who also happens to be a student in the university that they got a text from Deakin Uni. My first impression was, and they were just paranoid that they had clicked on a link. My first impression was someone has spoofed, sent a text to a bunch of random people, and it's just a spam. It was also 9:20 at night, so I wasn't thinking straight. It was after a big dinner as well. So, yeah, where was I? So, our CISO, who also happens to be a Fadi, was on a holiday, and he put me in charge. And I was like, this is going to be great. What can possibly go wrong? A few moments later, that was me trying to struggle to survive and just stay afloat. I'll talk about the incident itself. So what essentially ended up happening is we use a third-party provider to send out text messages, which we didn't know of. So the student admissions team used a third-party service to send results for students in a text message. So it's only students who subscribe to that service. It's a subset of all students. And during the time of the results, they just get a text message to say, here's your WAM for the trimester, and that's it. What had happened was that third-party service was compromised, and a Deakin user who had an account on that service, their account was compromised and was used to send out spam messages to all students that were in that system. So obviously, the team didn't clean up all the users when they've sent the text message, so just kept the list of all students that they've recently sent out the text message to. And as a result, we've had a breach. So this is the event timeline. The initial access happened on 10th of June. The actual text message, and we've identified the incident a month later. So a local account on this third-party service, which was owned by a staff member, was compromised. The staff member reused the same password in multiple locations, as everyone does. And at that stage, they only sent 3 text messages to see if the service was active and working. So they just did a test. Nothing happened at that point. And a couple of days after, on the 7th of July, was when we announced the results. So we uploaded a large file of student contact details, names and contact numbers, mobile numbers, onto the system through a CSV file. And there was 46,000 students that were onboarded to the system on the 7th of July. And we sent out exam results. So it was business as usual. So green is good. And on the 10th of July, the Sunday, is when the incident actually occurred. So we had around 4:27 p.m., we had an unauthorized user accessing the same account that was compromised on the 10th of June. And as a result, they were able to A, export the list of all users and their contact information, and B, send out a smishing campaign to all users. So when I got the message at 9:59 p.m. that night, we were able to jump in and quickly stop the campaign. So the campaign was actually sending messages incrementally. So at that time, 10,000 students had already received the text messages. We were able to stop the campaign by removing any credit. So we were able to freeze the account, remove credit, so there was no money on the account to be able to send text messages anymore. And we then dealt with the actual incident the following morning. So on the 11th of July is when all the fun happened. So the Monday we walked in, we just did some analysis to make sure that the incident has not creeped any further than the system that was compromised. And we put a critical incident management team together. Similar to Richard's presentation, we have a critical incident management team that sits outside of technologies, and they're responsible for the critical incidents across the university, which I'll get to in a second. And by 12th of July, impacted users were notified. So it was a very quick turnaround time. We had media involved. We had all the agencies that we were supposed to be reporting to reported. All the students that were impacted were contacted. So between 10th of July and 12th of July, we identified the incident. We were able to contain it, respond to it, and recover from it. So it was a very good exercise for us to be able to do all of this quite quickly. So this is our CIMT team, so our critical incident management team. So in preparation for the incident, this is the actual team that was put together. So we had privacy office involved from our legal team. We had the cybersecurity incident response team, which is my team. We had media and comms involved as well. A legal and student services team that was actually the service owner for this third-party service that was compromised. And they were our point of contact to work with the external vendor that had been compromised. We obviously have, being a Victorian university, we obviously have a few obligations that we'll have to comply with as well. So we had to talk to our partners, cybersecurity insurance, AHEX, and ACSC, and a bunch of others. So that was the team that was working on the incident itself. So just expanding on the timeline of the incident, so I've already touched on this, but the third-party system that was impacted, we were curious to see if any other activity was noticed on the environment itself. So we were not sure if the device of the user was compromised, and that's how the attacker got credentials for the account. But that was not the case. We were able to scan the workstation. We were able to scan all the other systems that the user had access to. So we went through the user's Active Directory to see what other privileged systems that they've had access to, and luckily we couldn't identify any malicious access. We've also got a few IOCs from the vendor as well. So the vendor was able to tell which IP address was used to send these text messages, which IP address was used for initial access. So we were able to validate to see if there were any other credential compromises across in the university's network. So that was not the case, which was good. And then we spent a lot of time trying to validate the information that was actually breached. So we were trying to figure out the 46,000 students that were impacted, how old was the data, is the information present, is it still relevant, are they current students or they past students, which took a bit of time as well because as you can imagine, it's a large data set to go through. And then came the containment of the incident. So as I mentioned, first thing we did was we dropped the account balance to 0, so you couldn't actually send any text messages. So at least we were not able to breach any further. We've also locked all accounts on that system, so up until we were able to figure out what was going on, No one could log into the system. No staff from the student administration team could log into that system. As a precaution, there were only about 8 users on the system, so we were able to quickly reset all of their passwords and ensure that the user whose password was breached also went in and reset passwords in all third-party systems. I think this person had about 16 odd systems that they were using for the university that they had to go in and change, so they were literally using the same password everywhere. And we also deleted and purged any data stored on this SMS gateway that was compromised. So just to make sure that the data doesn't go out any further. Then came eradication, so we were able to contain the incident, and then we were able to do a few things to improve the security posture of the system, of the third-party system itself. The funny thing is, we did a quick analysis of how many SMS gateways were used in the university. There were 6. 1 we knew of, 5 we didn't. This was one of the 5. We actually didn't even know the service existed. It was called something else, and another third-party company took over and bought the technology, so we had no idea. So we then onboarded the platform to make sure that we had a contact person for that platform. The platform had single sign-on. The platform had all the right security settings on that service, so to prevent any further breaches. We made sure that our procedure documents, so we've identified a few hiccups where we wanted to improve our manual, so we made sure we did that. We made sure that one of the things that has been an ongoing exercise is to actually review data that's being stored outside of a Deakin system. So this is going to be a very big exercise. Ideally, our policy states that if you are storing any personally identifiable information, that has to sit within an approved system. But our student management system does not have the capability to send out text messages. So there are all of these services and processes that the university will have to do and have to function that way, which means data has to come out of the system and move into other systems. So this is where we were trying to understand what that is. I'll go through a bit more detail of what we've done in that space. And then came recovery, right? So at this stage, we had really good relationships with our leadership. So our vice chancellor was very proactive. He had reached out to all executives across the board, asking them to tell third-party applications that they were using for their core business practices. So we've got a massive influx of third-party applications that were critical and needed to be assessed. We also we commenced work of consolidating all of these 6 SMS gateways. So essentially 6 different third-party solutions that was doing the exact same job. So consolidating that and setting up single sign-on, so we have a single identity system that the users interacted with. We're also working on improving our data use policies across as well, and I'll get to that in a bit. So post-incident, at this stage, we were trying to understand what worked and what didn't. So this was Fadi giving me feedback of what worked and what didn't. So one of the things that we've identified as part of this was we have a lot of partners that we work with, partners in defense, partners in other private research organizations that were really confused as to what was going. So as you can imagine, the world thought that this was just the tip of the iceberg and Deakin was in a really bad shape from a security standpoint. So we should have reached out to all of our partners. We didn't have a process for that. And now we've incorporated that into our CIMT exercise. So we make sure that we reach out to all key partners and let them know what was going on before they actually find out about this information through a media release. We've also done a few workshops with the federal government on SOCI Act. SOCI was quite new for us. We never had to test it at this capacity. So it was a conversation that we had to, so we and our legal team essentially decided that it was not a critical system that was compromised. It was an external third-party service, so it was not reportable. So we actually didn't report it through SOCI. But after having a few exercises, we realized that it potentially could have been something that we would have mentioned to them, if not actually reported to them. So, and we've been running, our CIMT has been running annual exercises to tabletop exercises, and which helped enormously as well. So we did a cybersecurity tabletop exercise last year, which was really good. And yeah, that's about it. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of feedback that came through as a result. There was a lot of misinformation that was being spread on student blogs and platforms. So we were trying to be as proactive as possible, and the media team was amazing to respond to those Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Reddit groups to explain to them what has actually happened. A lot of people thought that all of their private Deakin information, including their Instagram, was compromised. So there was a lot of panic and a lot of misinformation. We've also got a lot of good feedback from people as well, that the breach notification was clear and concise, and that we took responsibility for the action that had happened, although it was not a Deakin system in particular that was breached. But the fact that Deakin users were impacted meant that we needed to take responsibility for that. So where are we now? Obviously, this threw a spanner in the works of our strategy and plan that we had for last year and this year. So we've made a few amendments. We were heading in the right direction, but we started putting a lot more emphasis to data. So we started looking at third-party risks a bit more proactively. Up until this point, we were relying on the business to engage with us, to bring the risk to us rather than we discovering that risk. So we have been doing a lot of work in this space where we are proactively looking at network traffic, proactively looking at endpoint logs to identify what third-party systems are being used. And of course, Deakin, being a university, is very complex because we don't really block users from using a lot of these applications. So we're starting to engage with them to understand if they're using these applications for personal use or for work. So one of the screenshot on the left that you can see is a Microsoft tool that we use for endpoint detection. And this gives us a list of all OAuth applications that users are using with their Deakin username and password, and either through M365 or Google Workspaces or Salesforce. So that's been really insightful as well. So we were able to identify what they are. We were able to change some policies. So if, for example, you add an application on Outlook that required full access to your email and calendar, we would block those applications immediately, because we don't want to be encouraging that sort of behavior unless they engage with us first. And then we started looking at some of the high-risk shadow IT applications where sensitive data could be used. A good example is Dropbox. We don't use Dropbox at our enterprise. We use Microsoft OneDrive. So any data that's being stored in Dropbox that we don't have visibility over, we started identifying what those users are. Since a lot of them are using Deakin email, we're able to look at email logs. So this was a detection rule, for example, that we've written for Monday.com after we identified that a few users have been storing some sensitive information on Monday.com. So we just track everyone that's received an account confirmation email. So, and then we engage with them to see what they're actually doing with that particular service. So that's another cool way of actually detecting use of third-party applications that are not authorized. So look at your email flow logs, and then you can identify if there are anyone that's subscribing to or registering for these services. So like I mentioned, we've had about 70 plus applications that have come forward as in the light of the incident that we've had last year. All of them have been either critical to the business or have been storing sensitive information. So we've started doing things like setting up single sign-on. So our policy states that an average user or a standard user of the university should not have more than one set of credentials, and that's their Deakin credentials. So any application in the business that they interact with will have to go through the same sign-on platform, which we've done for majority of the applications, and we've continuing to do that. However, that can't be done everywhere, and we are aware of that. So we have an enterprise password management system that we've provided to all of these users. So if you are a media team, for example, and if you have media streams like Facebook for Deakin or Instagram for Deakin that you have to manage, we provide them shared accounts with the password manager, and they can share the credentials through that securely. The one thing that we haven't done in the past was actually monitor the strength of passwords that people were saving. So for example, if Deakin University's Facebook page password was Deakin123, we never cared about it in the past, we never looked into it. Now we actually have proactive logs. So as you can see, that red box there shows you risk score, security score of passwords that are quite low. So this is everyone that's using a Deakin Enterprise Password Manager. On the far right are users that have stronger passwords, but on the far left, we have people whose security score is rated as 5 and below on a scale of 100. So definitely you reuse to compromise passwords and things like that. So we've been proactive in getting in front of the user and forcing them to change those passwords. The other thing that we've done is, at the end of the day, what we are trying to protect in this particular use case and what the university does is data. So we have also had a lot of accidental breaches where accidentally information was shared broader than it was supposed to. So we've spent a lot of energy trying to get this labeling right, but within our 365 platform, we have 5 different labels that we've rolled out to all staff and students. So these labels are not just tags, they have permissions and encryption that are sitting behind these labels. So restricted to staff is a label when applied to a site or a document. Will enforce an ACL for that label, an access control for that label, which will stop a user from sharing that file to anyone outside the staff group. So we have about 35,000 SharePoint sites, and we've pushed this label as a default to all of them. So a large piece of work there, just trying to make sure that we get the labels right. And we have a few other labels like strictly confidential, which encrypts the file, so you are naming individuals that would need access to those files. So we're doing that. We also have a few things in the plan in terms of data discovery. We are looking at exact data match, so looking at contact information for staff and students as an example. We're already doing one with credit card information, so this is PII information with personal emails. So we have alerts within our SIEM platform. We're using Sentinel. Within our SIEM platform, we can see what the file is, what type of personal information is being collected on that document, and we have an alert triggered if one user is sharing for a personal document containing personal information to more than 5 users. So there's again a lot of work that's actually gone into putting these policies together and make sure that we are not getting too many alerts and the analyst team is not having an alert fatigue. So it's been very useful. We've done the same for some financial accounts as well and credit card information. So if you are storing credit card information on the file system or on M365, we then automatically remove permissions for that file and then alert the user to say that this information cannot be shared through these platforms, and you would have to use an enterprise password manager as an example to share sensitive information. So the idea is not to put a lid on this altogether. I don't think we'll ever be able to get to that, but the idea is to provide awareness, to provide, to educate our users that there are secure and better channels to share some of this information, rather than just dropping everything on spreadsheets and documents. So a quick little recap of what we've learned today. So effective communication is key. One thing that we've done really well with the incident is the fact that we were able to be transparent. We were able to communicate to our users that have been impacted. We were able to communicate to the media and get ahead of the message, rather than some of the other organizations in recent times that we've seen examples of. When you say you've had an incident and you give the media time to speculate, that's not going to end really well. So being a bit more transparent is very important and very useful, and your end users appreciate that. So just a sorry, taking ownership, apologizing to your users, and telling them what has happened and what services you provide will take you a long way. With the 10,000 people that received the spam message, because we were able to respond effectively, because we were able to contact those users in time, only one user ended up clicking on a link and providing their financial details. So we've only had one breach of 10,000 people that the campaign went out to, which is a very good story for us, and I think that's something that others can potentially learn from as well. The other thing is never waste a good crisis. So even if it's not your crisis, don't wait for crisis to happen within your own organization. Learn from other people's crises as well, and this is one of the reasons why we're presenting today. If you can share the story within your organization and with your management, and if that's going to help you drive your strategy and improve the security posture within your organization, that will be a win for you, and that will be a win for us. So I think like in events like these and conferences like these, it will be great to see more people sharing their stories, more people sharing their experience, and that's really important. And like we all know, all software you use matters. So it's important to engage with your end users, understand how they interact with technology. We have been doing a lot of targeted workshops with our staff as well, and that helped us unpack how they are interacting with technology, what sort of services that they're using outside the ones that are provided to us. It's really easy to say, this is a list of all endorsed tools, use them, and it's really hard to enforce that, especially in an organization like ours. So it's good to be proactive, good to have that relationship, good to engage with them, and also build that trust, so you are not slapping them on the wrist if they do something that they're not supposed to, but you are actually encouraging that conversation so you can work collaboratively to a more secure position that you're in. That's all from me. That's my information. If anyone wants to engage, find a bit more information about the incident that we've had, happy to share. And yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
So we got plenty of time to go through some questions.
Sure.
There are two on the app. So the first one is, what was the immediate reaction by other universities towards Deakin when the incident happened?
I think the university is an exceptionally well-connected and supported community. So we already have great relationships with other organizations. Within the first 2 weeks, we were able to do a report to the university sector. So we've presented similar findings with a bit more detail to the sector as well. We've always maintained transparent communication across the sector. So me, along with my CIO, presented to the university groups, so all Australian and New Zealand universities. So that was really good.
This is less of a question, more of a comment from Derek. So excellent point about not wasting a crisis. So Deakin's crisis actually helped them deal with some of their rogue shadow systems.
Great.
There is a question about the one user whose sensitive data was exposed.
Yep.
Did the legal team have to notify OAIC about that one?
No, we didn't need to. And the other thing that's important about that one user is nowhere in our incident reports or nowhere in our exec reports we ever mentioned who that user was. So that was a really important thing for us as well, because the first thing that we got asked from our management is, who is that person? And I think the bottom line is it doesn't really matter, right? It could be anyone, it could be you, it could be me. So we always kept the user details anonymous. Only the analyst that engaged with the user to scan their computer, to look through their account activity, was the only person that actually engaged and interacted with that person, and we never kept a paper trail of that.
Did you have to wrangle the legal team to actually issue the apology? What was the process there?
I think having a critical incident team is really effective, and when your legal team is included as part of the response to an incident, that's really good. We've done this tabletop exercise with our critical incident response teams before. We've done case studies like Red Cross, for an example, which has done exceptionally well a few years ago about their reporting and their apology, and how the response was as to some of the other institutions where they got a lot of backlash because they were not forthcoming. That message is something that the leadership team and the management understands. So I don't think we had to even discuss about the apology. It was obvious that apology was going to come out from Deakin, and we were going to own the incident.
Any questions from the crowd?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. It was very informative. Just one clarification over there. Was there any data breach?
Yep.
Because I know there's like this third-party service was compromised,
Yep.
but actually there was any data breach which was end up in the
Yep.
adversary and all that?
We didn't find the data in any of the dark web forums that we've had contacts with. So we've engaged some third-party agencies to do some digging for us. Couldn't find the data ending up anywhere, but we do know that the attacker that attacked that third-party system downloaded the data, and that was clear in the information that was sent out to the impacted users. So it was their first name, last name, the last result, so which was just it's a text message, right? So 120 characters of the text message was included in that data, along with their contact mobile number. So.
Any other questions? All right, please
Great.
thank Dushyant.
Thank you.